Good afternoon. I'm here to deliver an address on behalf of Queen Elizabeth II, or in full, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, by the grace of God of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and all of her other realms and territories, Queen, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith. Um, Today in my presentation, we're going to talk about Queen Elizabeth's early life, what she accomplished in her time as queen, and her legacy. To start off, Queen Elizabeth was born on April 21st, 1926, to parents Prince Albert, Duke of York, who eventually became King George VI, and Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, who was his wife. Initially, Queen Elizabeth was a very unlikely heir because her father was the second son of King George V, but when he died, Prince Albert's older brother, Edward VIII, abdicated the throne in order to make his younger brother king, which made Queen Elizabeth the heir to the throne. Most of her youth was spent alongside her sister, Princess Margaret Rose, and when they were young, their education was supervised by a governess named Marion Crawford, who later wrote a novel about them. After Marion Crawford no longer supervised their education, it was taken over by C.H.K. Martin, who I believe also wrote a book about them. The rest of their childhood occurred during World War II, where they were sent away to live in Balmoral Castle in Scotland and Windsor Castle for their own safety. But towards the end of the war, Princess Elizabeth began to get involved and joined the ATS, or Auxiliary Territorial Service, which was an organization in the war where women could get involved and have different jobs to help the soldiers. During her time there, she worked as a driver and an auto mechanic and started as a second subaltern and was later promoted to junior commander, which was the equivalent of captain. She trained for 5 months, but the war ended before she could be assigned to active duty. After the war, her betrothal to her distant cousin, Prince Philip, was announced, and they were married on November 20th in Westminster Abbey. In 1948, their first son, Prince Charles, was born. Now let's move on to her rule. So, starting in 1951, her father fell ill and she began to represent him in public and fulfill a lot of his duties. He died in 1952, but she was not coronated until June 2nd, 1953. Altogether, throughout her reign, her and her husband had 4 children: Prince Charles, Princess Anne, Prince Andrew, and Prince Edward. According to History.com, some of the key moments in her rule included the 1966 mining disaster of Wales, her silver and golden jubilees, Charles and Diana's wedding, and the growth of her family. One of the final points in the article discusses a year in her rule that she marked as Annus Horribilis, which means a terrible year in Latin, which was the year that Charles, Andrew, and Anne all split from their spouses, and a fire destroyed over 100 rooms in Windsor Castle. This year, especially Charles and Diana's divorce, sparked a lot of controversy and feedback towards the royal family, especially regarding Charles's affairs and Diana's closely following death, which was a really big deal for not only her country but for the world. And Diana's death brought a lot of criticism towards the Queen, especially because when Diana died, the Queen refused to address it publicly or let the flags fly in half-staff, and only changed her mind a few days later when she saw the backlash from the rest of the country. Later in her rule, her grandson Prince Harry married a biracial American actress named Meghan Markle, which unearthed a lot of past criticism towards the colonialism and racism in the history of the crown. They then they had their first child and announced that they'd be stepping back from the role in the monarchy. Lastly, one of the last significant events in her rule was her husband's death, which was in April of 2021. Moving on to her legacy, sadly, the Queen passed away on September 8th, 2022. Her life had an incredible impact on the world, and her rule had held many key moments in history. According to an article by Amy Lakowski from Boston University, the Queen will be most remembered for being the longest reigning sovereign of England. Her rule lasted 70 years and 214 days. Throughout her rule, she modernized the royal family and implemented a lot of new technologies and increased their relevance on social media. One of the most lasting changes that was made was converting the royal family from more of a political symbol and like a stoic kind of like, oh, I forgot the word, symbol into like a more familial style of media portrayal, and they began to become a part of celebrity culture and gossip and memes and Instagram and Twitter. To sum that all up, Queen Elizabeth experienced a lot during her time as queen and implemented a lot of new technologies in her rule. Today we talked about Queen Elizabeth's early life, what she accomplished during her rule, and her legacy. I hope you learned a little bit from my presentation today as I did when researching it.